Okay, welcome back everyone. It's June 9 of 2015. We're going to look at Paul Ricoeur's interpretation of Song of Solomon. And he begins with the awakening that the remnant being released out of Babylon experienced as an awakening to a new covenant that they could not yet fully understand. They just had a kind of initial awakening to Ezekiel's prophecy of a new covenant, but they still didn't fully understand. They still had the lingering understanding from the Egyptian Israel experience of a law being inscribed on stone tablets. So the idea of a new covenant is still kind of alien to them, but they do have this initial awakening. The new covenant will consist of a love that is both free and faithful. There will be a play of plurality of interpretations as he seeks to discover the meaning of new covenant. It will unfold as a divine movement of love, a teleology of the eros love of God, and it'll be veiled. The metaphorical interplay of the eros love is veiled behind the actual historical economy. But there will be an unveiling that proceeds through the wakeful recollection of the prophetic inauguration of new covenant, primarily with Ezekiel. A dualism does exist. They do understand that there's going to be a dualism between the poetic play of metaphor in the song that tries to find the understanding of new covenant and the historical narrative that is also unfolding its teleology of eros love. It does speak to the originary character of the promised covenant. The elect remnant are headed toward a new rebirth out of the midst of the wilderness, and so it does speak to this originary character of new covenant. And the originary character unfolds through a series of metaphorical scenes in the song. The climax is in the middle, Ricoeur says, chapters 4 and 5, where we read of the proposal and the acceptance of the king and the bride-to-be, and that becomes the actual climax that's situated in the middle of the song. The seal upon the heart, that is as strong as death, articulates the promised covenant of the teleology of eros love, which has the potential power to overcome death itself. The song is sapiential. It is a sapling-type wisdom, just sprouting up and emerging. Not true wisdom literature, but a first figurement of wisdom literature. The seal of promise becomes internalized as a meditative declaration of Yahweh, the covenant God, and it speaks to Yahweh's covenant vow of a devotion to the remnant, and the devotion and faithfulness to carry them to the New Jerusalem. So there's a proleptic looking forward to the consummation that will be reached in Jerusalem. But primarily we're looking at awakening here. The remnant elect are awakened to the desire to fully understand this new covenant, because right now it simply is an awakening as they are released out of Babylon, but they are far from understanding its full implications. As a matter of fact, there will be more education that will come through rabbinic interpretations, and of course through the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth in 1st century Jerusalem. So the new covenant is not yet understood, but the remnant is awakened to it, a first stage of awakening. This does represent a stasis of desire. It's a questioning movement that through the hope and the adoration, the remnant hopes to heighten the eventual abrasive covenant that will take place in the New Jerusalem. And with all this said, after the awakening, we're ready to transition to that new understanding of the new covenant and what that means. How did the new covenant come to be understood? We're ready for that second moment of the various historical interpretations of the song. And basically, Ricoeur says that the play of metaphor in the song is deconstructed to reach a universal metaphor of the nuptial bond. And there are three significant Christian reinterpretations that have taken place. There's the analogy and the individual baptized believer view, or the allegory and the mystical corporate ecclesial soul view, or the philological analogy of the conversion of Israel view. Now the baptized believer, the individual view, uses an analogy to interpret the poem, and therefore it can enlist substitution, and it can create new signification. And so this assimilation of analogy leads to new identifications, and they're all encased in a new positive liturgy that emerges. And so it does take up the originary text in a new way through analogy, and early Christianity appropriated this method and applied it to the baptismal liturgy, and a triad evolved of the mystery behind the rite of baptism, the appropriated poetic word from a song, and the new reinterpretation. That new reinterpretation equaled the fact that the beloved became equated with the individual baptized believer of the new covenant. So it's individualistic here. Beloved became equated with individual baptized believer of the new covenant. In the corporate view of allegory, the song must pass through a typological filter, and that is discoverable in the dialogue between word and soul. They took up Paul's dualism of the two covenants, the Jewish covenant and the Christian covenant, and it was used, this covenant, this dialogue between the two covenants, helps the interpreter to reach the higher spiritual sense of the song when it's viewed through the interplay of these two historical economies. And so a mystical expression comes forth, and here the beloved becomes equal to the church corporate soul. The intersubjective ecclesial soul becomes equal to the beloved. The third method is the method used today primarily, the philological analogy method. It's still analogous. It's a methodology of analogy, but it passes that analogy through a filter of a philosophical or a philological theme. And that theme is the sacred theme of Israel's salvation history. So that's the primary filter for gathering any parallel analogous text. But they do come up with four primary signs. The king equals Yahweh. The bedchamber equals the temple. The beloved equals the remnant of Israel being released out of Babylon. And the orientation is the return to Jerusalem with a new faithful and converted heart that the remnant possesses that the Egyptian Israel never possessed. Prophetic writings are enlisted to gather theological meaning for the song, but basically it talks about the fact that Israel is wakened to a brand new faithfulness of a true eros love toward Yahweh, the covenant God, that the Egyptian Israel failed at. And so it is a birth of a new heart of faithfulness and the birth of a new covenant. But it does kind of fluctuate between an individual view and a corporate view historically. That's the way that Ricoeur says it has unfolded. Some instances it becomes individual believer, in some instances it is the intersubjective corporate soul of the church. But with all that history having been said, we're going to now take a look at Paul Ricoeur's view, which really deviates quite a bit from the Jewish view of the remnant that's going to become born again. Instead, Ricoeur goes all the way back to Abraham and takes up the view of the song through Genesis. So now we'll pause and then we'll take a look at the third moment. Professor Ricoeur says that we're going to look at the intersecting semantic fields along the plane of intra-biblical reading. And that means we're going to look at Genesis 2:23 of the cry of jubilation by Adam at seeing Eve. And it's going to speak of a filter, a typological filter of the indestructibility of Yahweh's created innocent creation and creatures that can never be lost. Yahweh, from the very beginning of creation, from day one, has planted the teleology of soteria, and there will not be a loss of the innocence of the creation. It will be sustained and fulfilled in spite of all negativity, in spite of all evil and all suffering. Yahweh, the covenant God, will bring his creation and his innocent creatures to fulfillment. And so we have a look at the fact that that we do have a typological filter for his method. So it is, in essence, to me, it's a type of a philological analogy. Although he doesn't claim this position, it seems to be very similar to a philological analogy, where he chooses as his philological theme the indestructibility of Yahweh's created innocent creation. So when he gets to talking about the innocence, he says that the innocence of the erotic bond is emphasized. This constitutes a divine sovereign affirmation of his creation that he will never withdraw. He will remain faithful to that affirmation. And the song, therefore, is about the reopening of the enclave of innocence, and that it is to be the innocence sung by the song eschatologically anticipates the kingdom to come and the banquet to come of fulfillment. And it will be a kingdom of innocence and adoration that will reach its fruition in the New Jerusalem. So it's a song for Ricoeur of beginning and fulfillment, all nested within a salvation history, and that salvation history is defined by the name for his filter, the indestructibility of Yahweh's created innocent creation that will be faithfully affirmed by Yahweh, the covenant God, and will be faithfully fulfilled through the work of the telos of soteria, the teleology of salvation that is empowered by and will be fulfilled by Yahweh, the covenant God, from the very day one of creation. So it's an intersection of Genesis 2:23 with the song, and it's all about that indestructibility of the covenant that began from the very, very beginning of creation itself. So Ricoeur takes us all the way back to the moment of creation. He says that he doesn't take us back to exile, he takes us back to creation for his view. So it is quite a bit a different view than the Jewish view, but it is still very consistent with a philological analogy type method. And that'll take us up through page 300.